Welcome back to Red Eye Story Hour for tales told after midnight. I'm your host, R.J. Burley, and author. This is a continuation of Outcast from the Mountain Warriors series, the first book in it. And I am on Chapter 8. Too many moments passed without feeling the bullets ravage me. I opened my eyes and stared into the emotionless goggled eyes of the armed soldier's shiny black biohazard mask. The filters were located in the beak-like area of the front. It was obviously in the style of the bird-like mask from the plagues of the Dark Ages. On TV, the characters wearing them struck me as cartoonish. Seeing them up close with firearms aimed at me froze my heart. The glassy eyes of the gas mask got to me the most. It was like meeting three Darth Vaders. I closed my eyes again and waited for the impacts of the bullets. And waited. What the hell? I thought. These stormtroopers were facing a firing squad as well, if they didn't shoot me on the spot. I could swear that I heard their fingers creaking on the triggers. I heard one of them say in a youthful, high-pitched voice, "Shoot 'em, man!" Another whined, "No, you first." I uncoiled from my cowering stance and looked closer at them. The guns were shaking slightly in their adrenalized hands. I could see just enough behind the goggles that these were 18, maybe 19-year-old kids. Probably, just last year, they were trying to figure out how to get a cheerleader in the back seat of their car without a clue as to what to do next with her. These weren't killers, at least not yet. I stood to my full height and forced my shoulders back in a false display of confidence. "Good morning, Marines." I didn't know what they were, but I knew that Marines got mad if you called them soldiers, but not the other way around. Besides, I thought I would flatter them. "I am on a secret mission, with direct orders from your boss, Senior Deputy Thomas Lawrence, and ultimately from my uncle, Governor Daniel Hildebrand." I felt my desperation as I name-dropped, almost like a man in the movies will hold a cross and speak sacred names to the vampire, but luckily it seemed to be working for me. All three men lowered their guns, mere inches, but it was a start. I laid the BS on thick. They looked back and forth to each other as they tried to follow my story. It wasn't really a story. I just said whatever popped in my head to stall the inevitable. I figured when I stopped talking, they'd shoot. Finally, one of them said in a modulated voice through his mask, Okay, man. We'll take you back to headquarters. Just shut up for now." They slowly lowered their rifles a little bit more. However, now they aimed the barrels at my crotch instead of my chest. Having a gun pointed at the groin isn't pleasant from a physical standpoint, but I knew I was getting through to them. In fact, from that point on, I had a gun constantly pointed at me for the next hour or so. That does wear on the psyche in a way I can't explain. I was literally under the gun. In a robotic voice modulated by the face mask, I heard one of them ask, "Governor Daniel Hildebrand sent you?" I straightened, and despite my fear, or maybe because of my fear, I knew if I didn't put on a show of confidence, I would be immediately shot, incinerated, and my ashes scattered. I took on an air of command, and acted like my friend Tommy. "Yes, my Uncle Dan, Governor Hildebrand to you, sent me on this mission. It's also a secret operation, and I can't say anything more." In retrospect, that lie was comical in the fact that I had just babbled a whole load of crap about my supposed mission in the moments before. They all put a hand to their left shoulders and seemed to look at each other for a few minutes. I later learned that their left shoulder had a button that allowed them to communicate with each other without me overhearing. They finally pushed me ahead with their rifle tips, afraid to even touch me with their protective gloves. They ordered me into the back of a Humvee that was manufactured like a pickup truck. I sat on the hard metal floor of the back bed. but it felt comfortable just to get off my feet and away from the forest floor. I leaned back and almost screamed as I realized that I was leaning on a gas can. The realization that I came in contact with the canister that held the fuel for burning my dead remains horrified me to the core. When we arrived back at the outpost, a man in a biohazard suit and a bird-beaked mask stopped the vehicle with an authoritatively raised hand. By his posture, I could tell he was not going to be a pushover like my three captors. The driver slammed on the brakes. "Yes, Sergeant?" he asked as they all stepped out of the vehicle. I joined them now with 4 guns pointed at me. The 3 men who captured me received an ass-chewing that made me cringe. I was sure they would face the firing squad that I was supposed to face. After chewing them out, the sergeant turned his Darth Vader goggled eyes towards me. "Get your ass over here," he barked. I obeyed the order, and he pulled a handgun and placed it against my head. He explained to the kids who captured me, "This is how you shoot an Outlander. Get the gas can." I tried to use the magic words again. "But Governor Hildebrand is my—" "Shut up!" He pulled the trigger. I heard a click and cringed. The sergeant cursed, worked the slide to chamber around, and aimed at my head again. My legs gave out, and I fell on my knees. The sergeant hesitated as a black Mercedes with opaque and mirrored windows flew straight at us. I thought I would die by the impact of a car versus a bullet, but it came to a screeching halt, grinding on the gravel road. The bumper lightly tapped my face. I heard the car door open and slam, and running footsteps coming up to us. I coughed on the dust that the vehicle stirred. I could hear the fear in the sergeant's voice as he said, "Sir, we are just executing." I peeked through squinted eyes to see Don towering above us all. He inspired the same terror, maybe more, into the sergeant as he did to me. Don said, "You've done well, Sergeant. I'll handle this from here." Don turned his mackerel cold eyes to me. He had his own handgun pointed at my head. I saw the faintest hint of a smile as he turned the gun from me and shot the sergeant dead center in the chest. I saw the sergeant look at him with the mortal knowledge that he was dying that second. His mouth opened as if to ask the existential question, why? But no words came out. He was dead as he hit the ground. Don pumped another bullet into his head. Don turned to the remaining 3 soldiers, who were fearfully backing up. "Stand still!" They obeyed him out of terror. After he calmly shot 2 of them, the remaining one turned to run. Don's shot caught him in the back of the head. The man collapsed. The gun circled back to me. I was too dumb with shock to even cry out. He lowered his gun to his side. "Move the bodies off the road, where they can't immediately be seen." "Move! Now!" He roared the last 2 words. I just looked at him, too shocked to move. The violence I had witnessed could torment people for years. I only had a few seconds to appreciate what I saw and could only respond by staring with horror. I was in so far over my head that I could only stare stupidly at him and mutter, "Please, please, I'm sorry." Don pushed me over with a shoving foot on my shoulder and then kicked me in the side as hard as he could. "Move when I say move, damn it." I moved. I grabbed the boots of one of the dead men. His mask had flown off of him when Don's bullet shattered his head. His uniform was covered with his own brain matter. Don picked up his phone and made a call. "Yes, he's alive, although barely through my good graces," gave me a dirty look and walked out of my hearing range. I went back to work hauling the bodies. I never realized how heavy a dead person was until then. I had also never seen a freshly shot person up close before. The terror etched on their faces. The mortal questions blazed in their eyes beneath the slowly glazed and glassed over surfaces. There was an ickiness to even touching them, as their muscles had no reaction or resistance to my handling. That was layered with the fear that I wasn't far from joining them. When I finally moved the last body just out of sight, Don walked straight up to me. From the quick and sure swing of his long stride, I thought he was going to punch me or shoot me. Instead, he grabbed me by my hair and pulled me towards the outpost. "Aren't you afraid that I may have some of the germs from the Forbidden Zone?" I asked, hoping he'd let go. Instead, he grabbed my hair tighter and smacked me hard across the face and growled, "Shut up!" We entered the drab military bunker that was just large enough for an office and 2 small jail cells. He threw me in the cell by my hair, but didn't bother to close or lock the cell. This actually confused me. So I asked, "Aren't you afraid I'll try to escape?" He ignored me and made a snorting sound that may have been the closest thing he had to a laugh. He sat down and placed his feet on the lone desk and read a magazine that was on the top. "Hey, thanks for saving me," I said. I knew that sounded lame, but I wanted him to say something that would give me a hint of what was going on. He placed down the magazine and looked at me with his fish-cold eyes. "You're only alive because my orders are not to kill you, yet. If my orders come down to kill you, you will be dead. Nothing you say will change it or gain you any extra time. However, I can kick your ass all I want to in the meantime, so I suggest you not piss me off. In other words, shut the hell up." He calmly went back to reading his magazine without waiting for me to respond. I looked at my hands, which were shaking like I suffered from a palsy. No matter what I did, they would not stop trembling from the adrenaline dump. An hour passed, and Tommy arrived. He actually looked unfazed, like everything was in control and had happened according to plan. "Hey, Don," he said, like he was walking into the office on a normal business day. Tommy did a double take when he looked at my face. He greeted me with a, "Holy hell, you look like crap. Your face. Are you all right, Eric?" "Sure, a little rattled, but I'm fine," I said, putting on a brave face. "Your face," Tommy repeated. I was about to ask what he meant when I curiously touched my face. I winced from the pain and realized that I must have appeared badly bruised from the falls that I took. In fact, I could see the bruise on the bridge of my nose when I crossed my eyes. I kept thinking I had a bug or a smudge of dirt on it. I guess it was from the face plant into the tree as I sledded down the hill in the tent. "Did your captors do this to you?" he asked. I looked to Don to see if he was fearful that I might tell on him, but he had no worries. "No, Don was kind to me," I said, still trying to get on his good graces. Don showed no emotion and kept reading the magazine. Tommy nodded and said, "It must have been a hell of a fall down that cliff." I looked at him and the sudden movement hurt my neck. "How did you know that I fell?" "Suspicious, aren't you?" Tommy laughed. "When a city boy such as yourself ventures into the mountains, he's bound to fall. It was as certain as you screwing up this assignment. But I figured you'd last longer than 24 hours. Why didn't you try to find the survivors after you lost your gear?" "How did you know that I lost my gear?" I asked. I suspected that they were watching me the whole time. Now I knew for sure. It irked me that my friends still denied it, like I was out of their circle. I realized I would always be on the outs. He looked at me like I was a complete idiot. "You came back with no gear, correct?" He took a deep breath and looked past me, with his hands raised towards the heaven. He acted like he was asking the universe for advice. "Now what are we going to do with you?" The way he said that chilled me to the bone. It was obvious that he had very little to say in the matter, and like Don, he was just resigned to follow whatever orders came down the chain. Just then, Tommy's phone rang. His eyes widened slightly as he looked at who was calling him. He held up a finger to me and said, "Hold on a moment," without looking in my direction. He stepped outside the small building, but didn't bother to close the door. "Good morning, sir," Tommy said into the phone as he looked at the screen. There were only a handful of people he had to address as sir. I shuddered. After a pause, he said, "Yes, he screwed up again, this time very royally. But we expected that. I think your plan is sound, sir." Don snorted from the corner, but kept reading his magazine. After a brief conversation on the phone, out of my earshot, Tommy walked back in and held the screen up for me to talk. My blood ran cold as I looked at the screen and saw the stern, officious face. "Uncle Dan," I exclaimed. "That's governor to you." He then proceeded to curse me with words that would have shocked his constituents. Although he didn't actively court the right-wing religious votes that much, he still paid Christianity some lip service because most of the people in his area claimed that religion. However, I had a feeling if overnight the Wiccan beliefs became the dominant religion in his region, he would go on TV with a newly purchased broom and a black pointy hat if that's what he thought was required to garner the votes to keep him in power. He vented his wrath at me for a minute or so until I got irritated enough to say, "Hey, Gov, I just watched your errand boy, Don, murder 4 people in cold blood. Your yelling at me hardly phases me at this point. Just tell me my fate." He glared at me through the screen for a moment, took a deep breath as if he was about to really excoriate me for another minute, but instead chose a schmaltzier tactic. Rather than screaming, he sighed and said, "Eric, I raised you like a son after your parents passed away. I've helped you the best I could with all your harebrained schemes, hoping that you'd at least be half the man that my brother, your father, was. Now this? You really should be dead but for my mercy." I was exhausted and shell-shocked. I really had no care left to give. I was aware that they had already decided my fate. I simply wanted to know the outcome as well. Was I going to jail? Was I just going back to my normal life? Was this moment my last to live? "Cut the crap, Gov. I'm not dead. If I should be, I would be." I saw Don look at me with some surprise, and he actually smirked with a hint of admiration. I finished my rant. "Just tell me what's up." My uncle sighed and acted like the governor again. Any familial love was gone. He spoke more like an impartial judge rather than an angry uncle. "Tommy, Don," he said, "carry out the plan of the day." Tommy nodded and said, "Yes, sir." He took his phone back from my hand. His brown eyes were dead as mud puddles. I heard Don actually laugh as a black cloth sack was pulled over my head. Don slammed me against the desk and expertly handcuffed me before I realized what was happening. He smacked me across the head as I feebly resisted.